Hello everyone, Phreak here. Welcome to my patch 8.1 rundown for League of Legends. I want to give a couple of quick updates real quick coming into this video. First, I made some small changes to the overlay and sizing and cropping and whatnot, so hopefully it'll be a little bit easier to read things while keeping my sexy overlay in here as well. Let me know if that works for you. I'm also going to be scripting this entire video, including this intro. The goal is to keep myself a bit more concise and keep me from rambling quite so much, so hopefully we get a pithy but still very informative video as a result. And I'm also going to be referencing win rates while introducing each of the champions and their changes. I think it's worthwhile to include, and these data are, just so you know, exclusively from Ranked Solo Duo, and I'll be not only looking at the general all rating win rate, but also the high MMR brackets to kind of contrast that sort of information. Also, it's a very exciting patch. This is the patch that begins pro play for all the pro leagues, as well as for ladder play as well. LPL is going to be the first major league to start their season. They're going to begin Monday, January 15th. LCK falls the next day on the 16th, as well as the ladder season on the 16th as well, in the morning for every region in their kind of home time zones. The EULCS starts Friday the 19th, and the NALCS on Saturday the 20th. It's going to be the first games of all those leagues. I actually couldn't find reliable info on the LMS start, but it's going to be, I'm pretty sure, somewhere between Thursday and Saturday of that same week. So sometime in that sort of time frame. Also worth noting, just for those who are really keen to watch the NALCS, because that's the one that I'm working on. NA Academy actually starts before NALCS because they have the same schedule, but NA Academy starts 2 days early. So the first time you're going to get to see TSM play will be TSM Academy, which will be on Friday. Academy broadcasts are, I believe, 2 p.m. Pacific time every Friday, so you can watch that. Anyway, let's get on to the actual changes of the champions, and up first is going to be your friend and mine, Brand. Brand is the first change here. So I'm going to look at his win rates, by the way. So first for the mid lane, his general all elo win rate is 49.4%, sub 50. And his high elo mid win rate is 47.2, which is obviously quite a bit worse. At support, he's 50.5 in average play, but 46.8 in high elo. So Brand, very heavy downward spiral as skill improves. So here's my scripted notes. Up first, a quick buff to Brand. Honestly, Brand is a champion that probably should be sitting above 50% win rate because he's like a big dumb mage who really only deals damage, not much else. He's also really not reliable at all, which is part of why that pro win rate or the high win rate is so much lower. He's also one of the very biggest cases, as we mentioned before, of scaling down with player skill because high MMR games require poke and coordination. Low MMR games are just team fights all the time. And so because of his unique strengths and weaknesses, it can be a little bit hard to balance him. But I actually think that this set of changes lines up really well. So first, let's take a look at the numbers right here. Let's take a look at his W plus passive damage. His W is what he maxes first after all. And because it's percent health damage, I'm choosing the target as another equal leveled Brand. So via the passive buff, this ends up being a 10-ish% bump in damage output. Of course, the more AP he has, the less it matters as the passive doesn't scale with AP. And of course, if you're using a weaker skill trigger, like a rank 1E, then the more this buff matters. But you can kind of see the differences in damage output. Again, it's about 10%. Now, I do think this is the right buff for Brand. This guy was a great Deathfire touch user in the previous season, and also he was a Spell Thief user, of course, and still is in the support role because his passive would trigger it 3 times. But basically, those both got removed because Spell Thief no longer triggers 3 times through his passive, and Deathfire Touch is obviously gone. And so that sort of power, the extended high power dot, kind of got added back in, which is kind of nice because it makes him feel more like 2017 Brand, which I thought was in a pretty reasonable spot overall. I also think that adding specifically poke power back to the champion is more of a buff to high MMR games than lower MMR games because poke just is a bit more of an important factor in those cases, and it's not just the team fights. So I think Brand, as we saw from his win rates before, I think with these buffs, he'll definitely be worth picking, I would say, in your average elo games. Like if you're below Platinum, Brand is fine. I don't think these are going to be enough to make him an above average pick in high elo though, so I would probably shy away from picking Brand if your goal is to win, and considering that Ranked is starting in a week, your goal should probably be to win. All right, so next up is Evelynn. Evelynn is straight nuts. So average MMR play in the jungle, she's 50.8%, but in high MMR, 53.7. She is bonkers good. She's actually insane. She's gained a lot of win rate over time as people are learning her since she's a pretty new rework. That's kind of fresh. She also gained a lot from Runes Reforged because Electrocute is basically just better Thunderlords. And ultimately she just gets more damage out of it. At least for junglers, it's better Thunderlords because the cooldown doesn't mean quite as much. Dark Harvest also really good on her, and that's a decent option as well. And people are just kind of keying in on what the best runes are to pick. Honestly, Evelynn is nuts and actually insane in high MMR. So really, it feels kind of bad that she's getting a bug fix that actually buffs her win rate because it's a buff fix, right? I think Evelynn deserves nerfs. I think they should happen next patch. Hopefully that'll happen pretty soon. No matter what rating you are, Evelynn is absolutely worth playing in solo queue. You should pick that stuff up. Evelynn is nuts. She is definitely insane. I do not know if Evelynn will show up in the pro game, though. I simply have no idea what teams are scrimming with right now, and even if I did, I wouldn't reveal that information. I think she's good enough to be played in pro. I just don't know if teams are practicing her. So we'll just see what happens with that one. Next up is Graves. Graves is another bit of a weak performer, win rate data-wise, in the jungle for average elo 47.9, high MR 47.2, so pretty substantially below 50%. Out of curiosity, look at his top lane win rate, 45.3 for all MMR, so I mean substantially weaker there. And he used to be a top laner for a little bit of time after the rework, so something worth considering. So here's my notes for Graves. He is definitely weak heading into 8.1. Obviously before the patch. He's had a bunch of ups and downs throughout the year. We thought maybe with the nerf to comeback experience that if you get an early game lead, you could kind of keep that going and prevent your opponent from catching back up, but that didn't seem to have much effect on him, so needs some more, quite obviously. So there's three big changes to unpack. First is the cooldown change on Q. You can see, obviously the numbers are right here. I'm going to just put up the chart. So at first, the cooldown change to Q. It's honestly a nice buff to his jungle clear specifically. Yes, of course, his auto attacks mean a lot, his E means a lot, but getting sometimes a second or a third Q up that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise during a camp is going to help his clear speed quite a lot, even at the rank 1 value. Now, of course, because it's a flat reduction in cooldown by 1 second you're seeing on this table right here, the percentage increase or the percentage decrease, I guess in this case, means more the more points are in, because going from 14 to 13 doesn't mean as much as going from 10 to 9. But you still max Q first. You're going to get that mileage really quickly here, and it's going to affect his jungle clear. He's going to be a faster jungler no matter what, period. Next up is the Q mana cost. I don't really think it means that much for his jungle clear. I mean, in his first clear, he's going to get a blue buff. At rank 1, the mana cost isn't even any different. But once you start getting into those mid to late game team fights, you're going to start really feeling that 20 mana difference. And an even bigger place you're going to feel that mana cost difference is top lane Graves. If you're going to play Graves in the top lane, you're really going to feel that 20 mana difference. Going from 100 mana to being 80 mana is certainly a really big deal there. And again, you're maxing it first, so from level 9, you're feeling that 20 mana increase, and that's going to be really, really nice. The next big change is to his W, where the slow strength is getting increased, but the duration is getting cut really heavily. And it's very easy to look at this sort of chart and say, oh, well, but, it's going to fall off. At the higher ranks, the sort of net slow is going to go down. By the way, what this chart sort of says is the percentage slow multiplied by the duration as the net slow. But there's a lot of things that aren't shown in this chart, and some that are really relevant to keep thinking about. First off, slows don't stack at all. Only the highest single slow affects a champion at any given time. So if you've got a red buff, you can just sometimes overwrite your W or vice versa, and it doesn't mean anything. Whereas if you have a slow and a short but intense slow, you're sure to get that heavy slow in, and you can fall back to your red buff or your Victor W or whatever afterwards, and those can stack up pretty nicely. Additionally, a short intense slow can also help guarantee that your opponent is stuck inside the smoke screen for that first half second, which can help guarantee you get that nearsighted for as long as possible. And so they're not, walking out but able to attack while slowed, which would mean very much in the other cases. So ultimately, I don't know if this is enough to bring Graves back into the game as a top tier pick, but it definitely does help. These are buffs across the board, absolutely. The W change in isolation is honestly really small. I wouldn't expect it to have a huge impact, though I do think it is a buff. It actually might feel more powerful than it really is because, again, short, intense slows are felt quite a lot. The Q cooldown change obviously going to help his jungle clear. The Q mana cost going to help his general team fighting and his laning phase. I think he more closely approaches a 50% win rate. I think he definitely doesn't reach that top lane. I think he gets probably up to about 49%, maybe a bit higher. Maybe he does reach 50 in the jungle, but I don't think he goes up to 51 or something really, really high. I don't think he's going to be a great solo queue pick unless you're a Graves expert. I think this will be enough of a buff to make pros try playing him in scrims. I don't know the results of those games, nor would I tell you if I did, but I think this can definitely have This will almost certainly make pros try Graves, and we'll see what happens. Maybe we'll see him in the LCS in the first week or so. All right, next up, nerf to Heimerdinger's ult turret. Win rate wise, 51.7 in the top lane. Generally speaking, 52.2 for high rated top lane. So he's definitely on the strong side. And I actually do believe that Heimerdinger is a little bit overpowered. And sometimes it can be unfair to call Heimer OP because he tends to be a heavily mained champion that more often than not, or more often than with other champions, a Heimerdinger game is played by a Heimerdinger expert. Just because he's not that popular otherwise. But even still, I think he is on the strong side, and he does deserve at least slight nerfs. The math impact on this one is obviously really easy. It's a very obvious cut down of about 1/2 just off the ultimate beam. And even though this nerf looks really, really big, I think it slightly lies to you because it's only 1/2 the damage output of one of his 3 ultimate options. Because, of course, the ulti turret has the cannon damage as well, and he can ulti W and he can ulti E. So it's kind of only 1/6 of a nerf. I mean, sort of. Obviously, ulti turret is his, I think, most common ultimate, but and again, it does have an impact to the DPS there, but I don't think it's quite as big as this would feel like in a lot of people's minds. Ultimately, I don't think this nerf is so big that it sinks Heimer to like a sub 50 win rate. If it does, then I actually do hope he gets buffs to go back to 50 and change. I do think he deserves to sit just above 50%. I think this is also going to require a bit of relearning from Heimerdinger players, whether they're hardcore or casual, because you're going to have to relearn exactly when to use each ultimate because you have real choices there. It's not just weaker ability. You have to replace some of those use cases. So I think the actual initial impact of the nerf is going to be higher than the overall impact of the nerf. He'll gain a little bit of win rate over the course of the patch. This also helps push Heimerdinger ever so slightly away from anti-melee. It's been his problem for basically ever is that he's better against melees than any other class of champion, and that'll probably always be the case, but this will soften the blow ever so slightly, and I think slowly but surely he'll keep getting nudged toward being like a bit more of a fair champion across different matchups. Either way, I don't think this matters at all for pro play. I don't think anyone is ever really considering playing him, but for all you melee top laners out there, you'll feel a bit better when you see that Heimerdinger in Champ Select. Next up, pretty big changes to Kayle. Big hits to her base stats as well as cooldown scaling on Righteous Fury here. First off, win rate rise, 53.4% general play in top lane, which is nuts. 53.7 in high elo. So it's not even going down with better players. It's going up with better players. Same with Heimerdinger in this case. It's not like, oh, get good and this champion's not busted. This champion's dumb in all times. And Kayle's been nuts for basically forever. I mean, really, she's just been absolutely an incredible champion for a very, very long time. She's been a top win rate, top laner and mid laner. She's been above 50 in mid lane as well for as long as I can remember. She's a really big winner as well from the base stat changes from the Runes Reforged from the preseason update because she got compensated for losing magic pen marks because everyone else lost MR, right? You consider all the other mages where they just got nothing for marks, but Kayle also got attack speed. So she got double compensated for marks, which is a big buff to her damage output, which is why right here with these base stat changes where she's losing 5% of her bonus attack speed, she's losing some of her attack damage growth, which is going to end up being about 10 to 11 attack damage off by the end of it all. I think those are really good and very important nerfs to be had. This basically compensates for what happened with the free marks, which I think just had to happen on its own. The next thing that happens, though, is something that's really cool. I think it's a big design win. It's the E change where her cooldown is going to scale with rank. And so basically in the early game, because Kayle tends to play against melee champions, it gives her opponents a bit more of a window to play against her. Now that the downtime is 10 seconds on, 8 seconds off instead of 10 seconds on, 6 seconds off, more room for them to actually get to play League of Legends. But the big deal that Kayle players are going to like is that the rank 5 value now only requires 30% CDR to keep E up forever, instead of requiring basically 40% in the old patch. And keep in mind that even with requiring 40%, Kayle was still nuts in a 54% win rate. So this is a really big deal for her that she gets to skimp on 10% more in her build and still come out on top. This means you can do like Nashor's plus Lichbane or Nashor's plus something else to get yourself maybe Transcendence that rune or something. But you don't have to get all the way to 40% to keep E on forever. I think ultimately the E change net is actually a buff for Kayle. I think if only you did E, this would actually increase her win rate. But the base stat changes definitely are relevant to her DPS. Again, we have this table up here for how much she attacks. The difference in actual attacks per second, the far right column over here, is going to be depressed by the fact that she's going to build maybe Berserker's Greaves. She's going to maybe get Precision as a primary path, and she's going to build an Asher's Tooth, obviously, for more attack speed, so the value there is going to go down somewhat. Also, she builds so much ability power and has Nash's on hit that the attack damage nerf isn't going to hit her quite as hard, but it still does have meaning because she does auto-attack a lot. Ultimately, I think she's going to go down a little bit. I think she's still going to stay well above 50% win rate. Goes down maybe 1%, maybe 1.5 or 2, but that's on the extreme end. And again, I don't really think she's going to show up in pro play anyway. Not that Nurse would make that happen in the first place, so that seems really unlikely. Next up, Skarner is getting changes. Oh baby, Skarner. I know everybody makes jokes about Skarner, but honestly, I don't think he's in that bad of a spot. He's at a 49.1 or 49.0% win rate in general versus high MMR, which is, I think, okay. Oddly enough, Skarner is actually not that expert skewed. There's actually a lot of novice Skarners that play him, so it's not that big of a deal. Though, like most champions, his expert win rate is like 52 and change percent win rate, which is, pretty normal for any champion. So Skarner is not in an objectively really bad place, but a designer had a soft spot for him, it feels like, so they gave him a little bit more. Cool. I think these buffs are absolutely nuts. I think they are absolutely bonkers insane. I really believe that. Okay, so the mana pool change is kind of nice. I don't know how much this really matters for him. I don't know if he really has mana issues. But the fact that they're base mana buffs means, of course, it's more effective in the early game. It multiplies things like blue buff in the regen factor. His Spires do the same thing. They give him regen as well. So, again, maybe this does matter for the jungle clear, but I don't know if he actually ooms while playing. If you're brave enough to play him like in top lane or maybe support, the mana buffs mean even more in that case because mana is much scarcer outside the jungle. I also really, really like that he ends at exactly 1,000 mana. I love clean numbers. That makes me very happy. I would like more champions to end at exactly 1,000 mana. It feels good to me. The next thing, though, is the E does more damage, and I don't think it's a very big deal. His most common skill order is going to max E last, so it's going to be that 5 damage increase for a very long time. Maybe he changed his skill order as a result because the damage rank up went from plus 25 to plus 35 overall on the ability. From plus 35 to plus 45. I misspoke. I don't know if it's going to be so much that he's suddenly going to be maxing E second, but if he does, then hey, you're getting a 22% damage amp instead of an 8% damage amp, which is certainly really, really nice. That was the part that wasn't scripted, of course. The thing that's really nuts, though, is, again, this stun duration is going from 1 second to 1.5 seconds, and that is absolutely bonkers, okay? It's an extra half second of flat stun increase at all ranks, and not only is it more stun, but Skarner has mechanics that I'm sure most of you don't know. Fracture's cooldown is reduced by the duration of any hard crowd control that he inflicts at a 1-to-1 scaling. This means that it's whenever he then autoed someone, the cooldown went down by 1 second. And it went down by 1.75 seconds whenever he ulted someone. Now I'm going to assume that with the E stun going from 1 to 1.5, the E cooldown reduction is going to go from 1 to 1.5 as a result of these buffs. And let me tell you why this is nuts. Because a 40% CDR Skarner with max E has a 7.2 second cooldown on max fracture. So if you were to E, then R, and then after they're done being R'd, autoed them, you have 3.25 seconds of hard crowd control, which means you subtract your E cooldown by 3.25 seconds. Also, 3.25 seconds have elapsed, meaning another 3.25 seconds off the cooldown. And if you add those numbers together, it means you've got a 0.7 second cooldown left before your next E. At 45 CDR, if you're going to go inspiration somewhere, this becomes a 0.1 second cooldown between E, R, auto, and your next E coming up, basically meaning it's up right away. So what that means is you can't immediately prevent Skarner from E-Ring you. You have a nearly undodgeable 4.75 second straight hard crowd control combo on a 40 or 45 CDR Skarner. And all he needs is E to be maxed because none of the stun durations scale with rank. Just needs CDR and E max. No one has that kind of crowd control. That is nutty. There's another smaller benefit, is that Skarner also gets move speed, attack speed, and mana regen from his Spires, or when he's next to anyone crystallized by E auto or by the R. So he gets a little bit more attack speed, like a little bit more move speed, a little bit more mana regen. Not huge, but it technically exists, right? It's 50% more on his E now, which is kind of cute. Also, E is an AoE ability. You can stun more than one person in a team fight. So it's 1.5 seconds to maybe 2, maybe 3 champions in a fight. Maybe. And again, I really think Skarner ends up being absolutely bonkers nuts as a result. I think he's going to gain a lot out of the stun increase. However, I know a lot of players are going to be very, very bad at Skarner. He is a juggernaut sort of fighter, bruiser kind of guy. Captain Flowers does Warrior into Trinity Force to get 30 CDR right away. You need to stay ahead of your opponents because everything is all AD ratio, so bad Skarners will still fail. Skarner scales with himself kind of really, really hard, but I think Skarner is going to be insane. Flowers thinks Skarner is going to be insane. I don't know if any pros are going to practice him, but I think they should. And I think if you're looking for a sneaky, easy win jungler, Skarner is in there. I think he's going to be nuts. I think he's going to be amazing in solo queue. But again, I don't think pros are going to adapt to this champion because I don't think they're going to realize how dumb he is until they get stomped by it in solo queue. And then they'll notice, and then maybe they'll scrim in time, but they probably won't. We'll see what happens, though. Next up, Syndra. Syndra is statistically in the dumpster, 46.8 or 46.9% win rate based on matchmaking bracket. Those are pretty low, honestly. And she's kind of a weird case because she's sort of always had a bad win rate, but she's still been picked in pro play kind of a lot. And a lot of this I feel like is just being comfortable. Pros seem to not like getting out of their comfort zone that often, and that's why we still see champions like Syndra and Victor get played pretty reliably, even when they're not statistically that strong, especially compared to other options, but it still keeps happening because they feel comfortable with it. I also don't think that any of these bug fixes really buffer that much. I actually don't think they mean a lot. Again, I'm not really much of a mid laner. I'm not really much of a Syndra player. But outside of having a couple of more reliable R into E combos, and even those only went wrong occasionally because of bugs, I don't see this being a really big deal for Syndra. I think if you're playing solo queue, you probably still shouldn't pick her up. She's still sub 50 by a lot. In pro play, we probably still see her played because pros love Syndra. But I don't know. I don't think she's that insane. Yeah, basically that. Next up is Zoe, and I have literally more than a page written down about this champion. Let's start reading. First of all, across 7.24B, 47.8% win rate in average play, 49.6 across the patch for high rated games. Zoe is the current poster child for rage posting. She is certainly an exceptionally frustrating champion to play against, and honestly, in my opinion, she is a little bit too strong. But I don't think she's bonkers overpowered, though. Frustrating or not, you have champions like Kayle and Malzahar that are going to do more to actually win a game than Zoe will. Just in purely winning a game, those champions are better than she is. But again, Zoe is still strong. She's still a new champion. Her win rate is still steadily climbing over time as people learn the champion. And honestly, she was above 50% for the last couple of days if you look at only like individual day win rates, but that rate of growth is sort of slowing down. Again, above 50 though for most recent days, so again, she's definitely a bit strong, but really only in high MMR brackets, not for general play. Really, if you're not at least Platinum, you shouldn't be banning Zoe, especially not after these changes. Silver Zoes are bad at Zoe, except your free win. Like, yeah, you might be frustrated playing against her, but they're bad at Zoe. If you're Silver, don't ban Zoe. Don't be an idiot. You also notice that in these notes, there's not really a lot of hard number nerfs here. And this kind of got a lot of outrage from people who were like, wait, these aren't real nerfs, but I want to unpack what's actually happening. Okay, so first off, I want to look at this change to the Q and this change to the R, okay? Those two changes give you on the receiving end an extra 0.225 seconds of warning before her Q backwards, R forward Q, or Q backwards, Q forward R combo happens, all right? The QQR combo gives you another 0.225 seconds of warning. Because now her Q does not gain bonus range until Zoe fully appears on the other end of the R, which is a nerf of 1/8 of a second. It was halfway through the animation, now it's all the way through the quarter-second animation. That's an 1/8 of a second right there. Then the R change that I highlighted a second ago is another 1/10 of a second, which of course brings you to 0.225. So what's funny is even though the skill shots are really fast, I want to point out what the warning used to be, which is 0.025 seconds. Because you didn't see the beginning of the portal, you only needed 0.125 for the range to update, and so you basically never got any warning before the missile was flying at full range towards your face. It went from 0.025 to being a full 0.25, a full quarter second of warning. A full quarter second of warning from the beginning the portal animation shows up till she finally pops up at the top and it finally updates the range. This is a meaningful difference in the playing against bucket, basically. This does meaningfully affect what playing against looks like because you actually have a real warning to a max range Q. That's a really, 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 really big deal, but it looks like nothing on paper. Next up, let's talk about Sleepy Trouble Bubble, the 0.2 seconds of delay on the trap. Again, this ability in its best case is honestly really, really nuts. It's up to 2.3 seconds of hard crowd control. It's up to 440 base damage at max rank. Okay, yeah, she has to actually land a skill shot, but there's no ability in the game that does that much damage on its own without having very strict requirements. And the fact that if you miss, it also becomes a trap certainly makes it really good as well. I am glad they are making it easier to avoid the trap, though, and it should feel a little bit less BS being on the receiving end. And again, it doesn't look like much, but it will affect the playing against. You'll feel like you get hit by less BS bubbles, and that will help. Finally, one that actually does look good on paper, Hextech Gunblade is gone from minion drops on Spell Thief. I think that's a really, really, it's not a huge deal, but it's going to feel really better on the receiving end. I think it was like a super reliable, like not hard to use at all, just item, hit someone for free damage. The on-demand slow made landing Sleepy Trouble Bubble really free. The extra damage, obviously, just valuable as well. Again, I'm super glad this is gone. I actually think she should maybe lose access to other on-demand slows like Hextech GLP and Exhaust as minion drops, because I think just getting to land ease for free, getting to land the skill shot for free is just a little bit abusive, and it's kind of not okay. I do think it's interesting that minion drops actually require last hitting because it makes the mechanic weaker in lower rated games because obviously better players are better at last hitting. And so if your Silver Zoe can't last hit the melee minion, they don't get the drop, but the Challenger Zoe's going to get it every single time. So I would actually like if minions dropped items no matter what, it was just less common so that like Silver Zoe's got the same number of items and Challenger Zoe's just got less, and that you'd have like, you know, a bit more closeness in that playstyle, so that Zoe's a bit more balanceable across ratings. That's what I would like to see happen. Ultimately, again, none of these changes look big enough to stop people from complaining about Zoe. And again, I don't think almost anyone's going to appreciate the Q and R changes, whether on paper or they might appreciate it in game, but Zoe still does Zoe things, but on the receiving end, you're going to be getting more of a warning. And honestly, Zoe's biggest problem is that she feels unfair. And so I like that a lot of these changes are making a lot of these things feel more fair. They're going to require more out of the Zoe. They're going to require her to actually telegraph herself, actually land her combos with some level of skill and forethought. And I think that's really, really nice. As one final note, I want to compare Thresh to Zoe to Thresh specifically, because Thresh is another champion from Certainly T who was too strong on release, but I thought he did a really good job of trimming excess mechanics on the champion without really changing the feel or the mechanics that mattered on Thresh. You had things like the Lantern no longer providing an AoE shield to the entire team, and things like the box only dealing damage to a single champion instead of hitting all of them for half damage afterwards. And I think they're going to continue to do this kind of thing with Zoe as well, where really small things where Zoe's going to still feel like Zoe, but she's going to start feeling fairer and fairer and fairer in her mechanics, and it's going to start to feel a bit better to play against. And again, she's slightly strong. I think she does deserve real nerfs, and I think these are at least some small level of nerfs. But I think her biggest problem is things that feel unfair, which this tackles. And again, if you're not plat, Zoe is bad. Let your silver opponents play Zoe. They're bad at the champion. Please don't be an idiot, right? You're playing the new rank season. Let them be bad at Zoe. It's okay. One other thing I wanted to bring up, actually, is the fact that Orin exists. And I'm sure there's plenty of people who are like, wait a second, this is a Vera Splash Art update. Where's the Orin nerfs? And I tried to figure out why Orin is OP, and I just don't see it. I don't see it. I looked at his win rates, compared them to Nautilus, to Maokai, and to Scion, just to see if there's anything out there. No, Orin has worse win rates than all three of them. Orin is the worst of those four tanks in general play. The only one he's better than in high elo is Nautilus by 0.2% at 48.5. Like, Orin's high elo win rate is 48.5. Maokai's above 50. Sion's above 52. I just don't see it. Honestly, I don't see it. I think people are happy to complain about Orin. I think they might be frustrated by Orin. And maybe there's mechanics in pro play that really matter that make Orin really strong, but I just think you're all wrong as far as solo queue is concerned. I think the most recent W nerf brought Orin sub 50, and he stayed there for all of 7.24b. So I don't know what to tell you. I don't see it. I think you're all wrong thinking he's OP. Outside of literal pro play, he is objectively not overpowered. And that's just the fact. Let's move on. Varus got a nice new splash art. That's really cool. Some buffs to Predator as a rune. I'm just going to skip over most of this. They're really, really minor buffs. You can read through them if you want here yourself, but they don't mean a whole lot. Predator seems to have its place overall in the game right now. The most recent buffs seem to put it in a pretty good spot. Predator still going to have the issue of actually requiring gameplay to be used, unlike every other rune in the game that will fire on its own. Even though you can optimize runes, obviously, Predator literally requires you to do something special in that you have to attack, like click your boots. So it's going to have a depressed win rate for a while still as people learn how to use the rune. Next big update, Resolve path bonuses, and it's now split between Resolve and whether he goes Sorcery, Domination, or Precision in the rune page. And back in 2017, it was actually really common for a lot of players to get Resolve secondary on their Mastery trees. And this was actually backed up statistically for a very long time, and so I started running it before most of the pros did, but we started seeing most of the pros shift over as well, realizing that getting a bunch of extra health is really, really valuable. A lot of that power went away when you no longer had tailored rune pages, and people didn't seem to like going Resolve secondary for just things like 5 flat armor, but this is going to help push people towards that way. And I think this is definitely positive in terms of incentivizing Resolve splashes by splitting that. Also, it means that you can see tankier champions like Maokai get some ability power, which should feel pretty good, or someone like Darius gets some attack speed by going Precision secondary. If you still want pure health, you can go Resolve Inspiration and just get flat HP, but it should help tanks trade for a bit more damage, and it should help squishies who need some health get a bit more there. So I think kind of wins all around and kind of fun things to consider. So I do like this in what's happening. Next up, we have a giant set of runes bug fixes. I'm going to only really read 2 that I care about. Up first, Unsealed Spellbook now updates properly in Spectator when you upgrade your summoner spells. That's really, really nice. That's a big deal. I'm glad that's in for this. And then also the next one I care about is a bug with Revitalize, which I'm missing briefly. I'm reading and I'm not seeing it, but basically Revitalize against abilities that cost health. That should have been bug fixed, although I'm not seeing it anymore, so maybe it got cut out of the patch and they were wrong about it existing. Either way, there was a note about Revitalize and bug fixes and whatnot, so we're going to move on since I don't see it anymore. Or I'm just actually blind. There's a patch note for item selling. You can read it right here. If you close the item shop within a quarter second of selling an item, the sale is canceled. This almost never matters unless... because there's almost never a reason to sell something and then not buy something afterwards. So this shouldn't get in your way in almost any case, unless you were, obviously if you were misclicking, then it can help you. The only way it could actually get in your way is if you're like a Kleptomancy user and you're trying to make room for free boots to show up in about 10 seconds, and you want to sell like a mana potion and walk to lane. If you sell and close it too early, it'll undo the sale. So you can have awkward issues in klepto cases or inspiration cases, but by and large this is probably just a nice little benefit for people. But just keep that in mind. Be careful about closing your shop at the right time. Quick into the health bar update. I already like the new health bars. I didn't really think the complaints made a lot of sense to me, but apparently there's just more contrast, better background, slightly better text and whatnot. I haven't seen this in action, so I can't really give much commentary, but I assume this will help, and you'll all feel a bit happy about that. So that's kind of nice. Huge update to Honor coming in as well, which I think is really, really cool. Keep in mind that Honor is the way that you get your key fragments. Right? When you get an S with a champion, or someone in your premade gets an S when you're playing a champion, you get a box, but those boxes need keys. And Honor is now how you get those key fragments. In the previous season, or like a year or so ago, it used to be that you would just get one after a win every so often, and you'd get up to 3 key fragments a week, or 12 a month, or whatever the actual numbers were, but basically you would get roughly 1 full key per box if you played really actively. That should still be the same through the Honor system. And then Honor, I think, also gave away capsules, and capsules could provide even more fun little benefits. So that'll be kind of nice. I am not sure exactly how it affects the prior random drops, the prior random capsules, or even just the general individual key fragment that dropped. I don't know exactly how the numbers are changing there, but I do like that the overall change of what's happening, as I actually start to tell you what's here in the patch notes, is that they're adding specific checkpoints within Honor that guarantee rewards. So right here, you're seeing that there's right, if you get to level 1, you get a key. If you get to level 2, you get a key. If you get to a checkpoint within level 2, you get 2 key fragments. If you're going through level 3, you're getting orbs now at your checkpoint. Through level 4, you're getting orbs. Level 5, you're getting orbs, and both on level up and on checkpoints. So this is really nice that you're gonna start seeing very obvious drops. You're gonna be much less reliant on RNG to get all of your drops here. Again, the way the post is worded, I'm not sure exactly what is happening to the prior random drops, if they're going away or just becoming less frequent or what. I'm not entirely certain, but I do know that honestly, Riot does try to do the best thing for its players, and so you kind of combine what I'm almost certain are good intentions with reduced variance. A lot of players are going to be a lot happier with their honor rewards, and so this should be a pretty nice thing. The one final thing I'm going to look at is the set of bug fixes, which again is more than a page, and not a lot of them really matters. The ones that I care about are tier on manaless champions, which is right here. You can no longer stack tier with manaless abilities, which mostly is sad for Kassadin more than anyone else. And actually, that was already true anyway. You couldn't stack tier with Kassadin W from last patch already, but now it's actually brought out into a bug fix. Oh well, I think it's still a good item on Kassadin, so it's not the worst thing in the world. Then also this Gangplank Q parlay cooldown change, going in cooldown start of cast instead of end of cast. I guess it's technically a Gangplank buff. He seems to already be pretty good, so I'm not sure really what the point of this fix is, but it's not really a big deal, and I'm sure it's just a consistency thing. The only thing I cared about as well was something with Vayne and her ultimate stealth. Her first tumble out of R now will show a proper animation and give proper sound, which is a little bit nice. Honestly, being able to actually see your opponents is a really big deal. This is not a meaningful enough nerf to or a meaningful enough bug fix to really nerf Vayne. She'll still be the best bot laner in League of Legends, but hey, nice to see something at least a little bit changed, so that's kind of nice. I noticed at the end, as I went through my script and went through the end of these patch notes, that as we get one more skin that's kind of cool and some more emotes, these are nice as well, that I kind of got off book a little bit, which I'm a little bit sad about. So to add a bit more than I wanted to, but let me know how you thought the patch rundown went. Please give me some comments. Leave me them in the comments below or at my Twitter, which you can see right below my face down here. Let me know what you thought. 8.1 I think is a pretty good patch. It's definitely a pretty small one because a lot of people were on break leading into the patch. But I still think everything made more or less some sense, and we'll see what happens. And I'm very much excited for Pro Play to happen, as well as the start of the Pro season of solo queue, as we're all going to go try to smash some noobs. It'll be great. It'll be exciting. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.